The Baltimore Ravens kicked off day one of OTAs yesterday, and some veterans showed up and made a statement by doing so. We'll talk about that. Zay Flowers making a big move and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here today, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We're available on all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and in audio form where you can follow along and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We're 5 days a week here on Locked On Ravens, Monday through Friday, each and every single week. Plus, we go live after every Ravens game and every piece of big news. We also have some bonus episodes that come out on the weekends when the headlines do permit. And shout out to all the everydayers out there, the first-time listeners, and if you're somewhere in the middle, shout out to you as well. Day one of OTA is officially in the books. It was not open to the media, so we don't necessarily know the nitty-gritty of what happened or anything like that, but we did get to see a little bit of a sneak preview, mainly around DeAndre Hopkins. And in that video, if you didn't catch the video or you didn't catch the vets who popped up in that video, there were a handful of veterans there. And I want to talk about those veterans that were there and the statement that they made in showing up, because to me, it does show a lot about the vets that showed up there. And again, I want to make it clear right off the bat here. It doesn't mean anything for the guys that didn't show up. I've made that very clear. But we also know that it can fluctuate who's in attendance, who's not for voluntary OTA. So we'll dive into all of that. Then in the second part of the show, Zay Flowers makes a big move ahead of his contract. His next contract is going to come up in a couple of years. And obviously, just thinking ahead for that, Zay Flowers certainly should be. So he makes a big move. We'll talk about that in the second part of the show. And then finally, we'll get into some underrated Ravens for 2025, because I feel like obviously everyone talks about the stars, and rightfully so. But I also think that we got to pay attention to some of these underrated guys that can maybe make a big impact for Baltimore in 2025. So let's talk about it here. OTAs, again, today's practice will be open to the media, so we'll hear about a lot of the players, who's there, who's not, and if anybody else showed up, and also just how these guys look. But yesterday's practice, I mentioned that sneak peek preview, whatever you want to call it, with DeAndre Hopkins. And first of all, I think people just forget that DeAndre Hopkins is a Raven, honestly. It just feels like that move was made and then kind of was brushed under the rug, hasn't really been talked about a ton. I think DeAndre is an awesome addition for the team. Obviously, as we've talked about on the show, he's not prime DeAndre Hopkins. He's not prime Texans DeAndre Hopkins, anything along those lines. But I think he is an upgrade over what you've had at wide receiver 3 for the past couple of years, and that includes Odell Beckham Jr. and Nelson Aguilar. And you don't want him to be playing necessarily in every snap role for you, but in limited action, and that being calculated limited action where he can be utilized in the best way to his ability. DeAndre is going to be, I think, a really good player for this team and possibly even have a resurgent season for Baltimore. Now, DeAndre in purple and black, he looks good. All right. If you haven't seen the pictures, haven't seen the videos of DeAndre yet, be sure to go check out the Ravens socials, because, man, it's something that I think a lot of people have been dreaming of for a while, maybe a couple years too late, but it's happened. It's here. And to me, I'm very excited about it. But the Ravens put out a mini highlight tape of DeAndre catching some passes, running some drills. And in that video, you can see multiple other veterans show up on the film, show up on a tape. So I just want to run through who those actually were, because, again, it's important that we know who's there and who's not. And, again, we'll get more clarity on that today and kind of as practice goes on here. But I think, to me, watching the tape and kind of rolling through it and going and figuring out, look, you honestly had to look pretty hard to see. So some of the players who were spotted in some of these videos include Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Ronnie Stanley, Nnamdi Madubuike, Travis Jones, Nate Wiggins, Lobi Awuzie, Patrick Ricard, Keaton Mitchell, and there were others there as well. Obviously, Tyler Wallace was there, and a bunch of others. The rookies, obviously, younger players, Adisa Isaac, the whole nine, Trenton Simpson. it was really good to see these guys on the field for Baltimore making impacts. And I think the statement that these guys made who did show up, and again, for those who weren't there, I didn't see Lamar in this video. I don't know if Lamar is there or not. We'll get more clarity on that. But these are just the players that I saw in the video. But regardless, the vets that showed up, the guys that I listed, and the other two were there, it shows that this team wants to win. It shows that this team is trying to be competitive, win a Super Bowl, and that every rep does count for those guys. Now, for those that don't show up, they're doing their own thing, right? They're working out. They're getting their work in. But I think showing up, making that statement and saying, hey, we're here. We want to get more time with coaches. We want to go out there and build more camaraderie with teammates. And again, OTAs, there's no contact, no live hitting or anything like that. So, that's when the pads come on in training camp. That's when you start to get that action. But, it's nice to have Ravens football back, seeing those guys back in the building and making sure that they can get a head start. And again, for guys like DeAndre, Chidobe Awuzie, newer players to the team, them showing up is a really big deal. And again, it's big because for them, this is a new experience for them. It's a new team. You're learning a new playbook. You're getting acclimated with a lot of new teammates. Whereas for some of the other vets on the roster, like, Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews have, going on 8 years here of experience together. So in terms of building that camaraderie and chemistry, Lamar and Mark, they don't need OTAs to build that up. It's already there. You have other guys that need it more. And that's kind of for lack of better terms, because I think that every player does need reps all the time. But because again, I said on yesterday's show, I've been very consistent in saying this. Ideally, you get as many reps as possible. Every rep does count in a way, but it's not going to make or break Baltimore's Super Bowl chances. And that's okay. But, for a guy like Derrick Henry who signed his deal, him being out there is huge. Mark Andrews, we know that he does his offseason work. Remember, they went out to Arizona. It was Marquise Brown and, Andrews. Lamar was out there. They were all having fun out there. There's a couple others who went out there as well, I believe. But they all went out to Arizona. They worked. So, again, the offseason work is continuing for all these guys, whether they are in Baltimore or not. But I do think that there is that extra step of, hey, you're in the building, you're doing your thing. But I'm not going to knock anybody for not being there, because what's that word? Voluntary OTAs. So there will be more clarity today and as the practices go on, because again, it does fluctuate. Sometimes guys come for some and then the next week they're not there. Sometimes they show up for the week after they're not there the first week. So I remember, all these OTAs get kind of mashed together in my head, but I think there was one year, and honestly might have been last year, where Lamar didn't show up for the first day or first couple days, or might have even been the first week of OTAs. And then he showed up for the second week, and everyone's like, oh, okay, that's cool. But everybody was flipping out about Lamar not being there for whatever that was, day or week of OTAs. And then, okay, hey, Lamar's here. This is cool. So it might be that way again. Maybe Lamar's not there right now. I mean, he shows up next week. I don't know what the plan is. I don't know who's there in that like full list. All I'm going off of, again, is that video. But again, it's really cool to see the vets show up, because they don't have to. Nobody has to, right? It's about wanting to be there, wanting to get better with your teammates. And if they're not there, then that's cool too. But obviously, I've stated my ideal preference is everybody does show up. But at the end of the day, you see some of these guys put in the work all off season, leading up to this point. And at this point, you're running routes, you're, getting acclimated with the new wrinkles in the playbook. Todd Monk and Zach Orr working really hard all off season. And look, there's a long road ahead here. The rest of OTAs, obviously, mini camp when it comes up, training camp as well. I don't necessarily know what my expectation was in terms of vets that I was expecting to see. And, maybe this will, I'll probably get more clarity on this as, the day goes on today and as we record for tomorrow's show and kind of look at some of the takeaways from the open media practice. But, I think in terms of my expectations, I, again, didn't really know what to expect in terms of who was going to show up and who didn't. But looking at the video, and that's just the video, there are probably more. But just off of the video, I am pleased with the list of guys here that did show up. So I think it's a big statement. It's a really cool thing. And coming up in the second part of the show, we'll talk about Zay Flowers making a big move ahead of his contract extension or big contract elsewhere. We don't know what's going to happen with Zay. Hopefully he stays in Baltimore, but he is preparing for his next deal. Stay tuned. A lot coming up on the show. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night is delivered highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. And what did I say? I said the Pacers are going to win Game 4, and they did. They went up 3-1. Now it's Game 5 between the Thunder and the Wolves. The Thunder are looking to head to the NBA Finals and close out the Wolves. Now, on FanDuel, the Thunder are 8.5 home favorites, 8.5-point home favorites there. I like the Thunder. I feel like 3-1. Obviously, Minnesota's playing with their back against the wall. Anthony Edwards is awesome, but man, that Thunder defense is incredible, and SGA is one of the best performers of these playoffs. So if you want to maybe go the over on Shea, over on Jalen Williams, maybe Chet Holmgren, be sure to head over to FanDuel. So if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make everyone more FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher here talking with you on this midweek edition of the show. Day 2 of OTAs kicks off today, and of course, we'll be back here tomorrow talking all about it. That practice will be open to the media, so plenty of takeaways to talk about there. But let's talk about Zay Flowers, who obviously is going to be up for a new deal soon, someone that the Ravens should definitely be looking to extend. But in my opinion, it's kind of uncharted territory for the Ravens here because they have not had a ton of success drafting wide receivers. Obviously, with Rashod, Bateman, and Zay Flowers, that fortune has turned in their favor, luckily. But that does mean that they are going to have to pony up the big bucks if they want to keep a guy like Zay Flowers, especially if he continues to play at this pace. Now, yesterday, Zay Flowers, he made a big move. Adam Schefter reported, and then it was later confirmed by the agency that Zay Flowers is switching agencies. He was previously represented by Zach Hiller, who we actually had on this show when Dalvin Cook signed, because he also represents Dalvin Cook and J.K. Dobbins. So we talked about Zay, Dalvin, and J.K. But Zach Hiller, who is the CEO and founder of Loyalty Above All, the agency over there, Zay Flowers has now switched over to WSG. So he is being represented by a new agency, and it is a big move for him. He's going to the Win Sports Group, which obviously that's what WSG stands for, but it's a new sports representation firm founded by the former football division of WME Sports, and that clientele for them, now it has Zay Flowers. It also has guys like Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson, and Nick Bosa. So Zay is joining multiple other high-profile NFL athletes at this firm. And, Zay is obviously looking for a payday, as he should, trying to get that first big deal after signing his rookie contract. And he deserves it, Zay's a guy that the Ravens will have to make the decision on the 5th-year option coming up on him next season. And then, hopefully an extension for him is going to be on the table. You look at some of the wide receiver contracts and salaries right now, is he going to get Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson money? I don't think so, right? I think that's probably, 40 million, 35 million a season. I'm not sure I am there with Zay Flowers, but, you look at a couple of guys down, someone like a Deebo Samuel who's making 23 million, maybe a guy like a Michael Pittman who's making 23, Christian Kirk, before he got cut, that was $18 million that he got from Jacksonville, right? That's per year. Cooper Kupp is making 15 million. Khalil Shakir just got a deal worth 13. So again, I don't think that Zay's going to get up in near that $20 million range, at least if he signed right now. I'd probably put it more in that Khalil Shakir-ish area. But, you look at some of these guys like Calvin Ridley's making $23 million a season. I think you're just looking over how bad some of these deals actually are when I'm honestly looking at it. But I would probably, and again, the salary cap will go up. So that obviously maybe will have a role to play where Zay might get a little more money, but I would say probably 13 is on the low end because I think Zay is a much better player than Khalil Shakir, if we're being honest. And there's no hate to Khalil Shakir. He's a great player, but I would probably put Zay somewhere in the $15 to $20 million range per year. And honestly, with the salary cap going up, maybe that's 15 to 25 million per season. Now, again, 25 would put him in the same conversations as Devonta Smith, DJ Moore, etc. DJ's making 27.5. Devonta Smith's making 25 even. Is that a contract you'd want to give up to Zay? I mean, look, if he continues to ascend and he continues to get better and better and better, and there's still a couple more years before this deal hypothetically needs to be signed, I could see Zay getting a really big deal like that. Again, I'm not putting him in the 30 million per year category. I think 25 is probably where I'd cap out for Zay right now, anywhere from 15 to 25 per year. But again, that's just kind of the unprecedented nature of this whole conversation, because you're also going to have to figure out what you want to do with Rashod Bateman. Now, Bateman, I could see anywhere in that like 10 to $15 million range. You know, he's going to want his first big payday as well if he continues to ascend. And that's something the Ravens are going to have to figure out, two big wide receiver contracts for two really big players and two really big parts of their offense. So, you know, Zay is somebody that if he continues to go the way that he's going and perform the way that he's performing, he is going to get a deal, and it's going to be a big one. And so Baltimore's going to have to weigh that, and they obviously structure their contracts and their deals so they can fit more big money contracts coming in as others expire, and they'll have to figure out what they want to do with Kyle Hamilton, Tyler Linderbaum, Isaiah Likely, Travis Jones. That list goes on and on and on. But Zay's one of those guys that isn't like a high priority right now. But again, establishing kind of what he wants, and if he takes that an even bigger step next season, you know, we're going to be talking about a player that is probably up there with some of the best wide receivers in this league. And I'm not talking about like Jamar and Justin Jefferson, but in a conversation with a lot of other star-powered players, because I think Zay is an underrated player, in my opinion, and kind of a teaser for the third part of the show. And he's not going to be a part of that, but I think just nationally, I think Zay is kind of underrated. You know, he's Baltimore's wide receiver one, in my opinion. I know that a lot of people are having conversations about who truly is that between Bateman and Flowers. I believe it's Flowers, and I think Bateman's an awesome high-end wide receiver too. But Zay doesn't have that prototypical like wide receiver one build, the DK Metcalf build, the AJ Brown build. Zay doesn't have that. But I don't really factor that in. Like, Zay is super shifty. He's a 3-level receiver. He jukes you out of your shoes. He is a yak demon out there on the field, and that is the best compliment I can give him. He is awesome out there in open space, and honestly, to me, someone that has really fit in with what Baltimore wants to do offensively, and is such a special player. So, look, it's a big deal for Zay getting that first big payday whenever that is going to come, and honestly, with whoever it's going to come with, because there's not just like any of these guys, we can put a percentage on how likely it is. Until it happens, though, it's not actually guaranteed to happen. So it could be with Baltimore, it could be with somewhere else or someone else. There is an unfortunate situation, and there are possibilities of every which thing happening, every which way thing could go. There is an unfortunate reality that maybe Baltimore would have to choose between Rashod Bateman and Zay Flowers, just based off of some of these deals guys are going to get. And you can front load deals, back load deals. There are ways to work around the cap. Obviously, we see it all the time, and the Ravens know what they're doing in that regard. So hopefully it doesn't come to that. But when you start to think about how many other guys are up for extensions, what that will mean for guys that have to wait a little bit longer for their deals, like a Flowers or Bateman, it does serve the question. And, you know, if the salary cap keeps going up, that average annual value number gets pushed up more, other wide receivers get richer contracts. And then, you know, you look at it, Bateman and Flowers both deserve big paydays. So we're going to see, because it's something, and again, you don't have to worry about that right now, right? At this moment, that's not something you have to worry about. But down the line, especially with this change from Zay Flowers, Bateman obviously thinking about a deal probably as well, you know, it's something that is not as far away as you might think it is in terms of the decisions Baltimore has to make on those two players. So coming up in the final part of the show, we'll dive a little bit more into some underrated Ravens for 2025. Not really nationally, but just guys that I think can make a big impact for Baltimore that maybe aren't being talked about enough. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot coming up on the show. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher talking with you right at the end of May. Where's the time gone? I mean, seriously, the draft feels like it was yesterday. It also feels like it was 5 months ago. It just, time is such a weird concept, and we've been doing this for a long time over here on Locked On Ravens. Since 2019, I've been hosting this show back in August. Nearly 6 years I've been doing this show. I've never missed an episode of it every single weekday. I'm here for you every single weekday here on Locked On Ravens, and I truly mean that. I love doing this show and being a voice that you can listen to, or a face you can watch, video or audio form, and have that daily Ravens coverage at your disposal. So if you're new to the channel, hit the like and subscribe button in video form, or if you're listening in audio form, follow along, subscribe in audio form as well. Really appreciate all of the support. Let's talk about some underrated Ravens. I think this is really exciting because, and I mentioned this on yesterday's show, I mentioned it a little bit today as well. Stars are going to be stars. You need stars to win Super Bowls. You need stars to win championships. It's inevitable. But it's not just about your stars. You need to have those underrated players, those depth pieces that'll step up and make a big play for you, that'll win a game for you and propel you into the postseason, maybe get you a better seed than an opponent that'll help you down the line. You know, a player, for example, and we'll talk about this player, or I guess I'll talk about him now, for being honest, like Tylan Wallace. Tylan Wallace is super, super underrated. He's going to come into the year as their wide receiver 4. He'll have the inside track on that job. Now, Tez Walker, LaJohntay Wester will also be competing with him. Your top 3 is pretty much set with Zay Flowers, Rashod, Bateman, DeAndre Hopkins. But Tylan is super underrated. I mean, obviously, he had the big moment against the Rams a couple of years ago where that's his career-defining moment. And he'll live and have that forever. And it was super exciting. But as a wide receiver, you know, he's someone that hasn't really gotten a ton of run. Obviously, there are certain circumstances behind that and certain reasons behind that. But, man, I think Tylan's super, super underrated and honestly should be getting more run. Like, I think that he should. And if you want to interchange DeAndre Hopkins and Tylan Wallace, if you want to keep DeAndre as fresh as possible, I'd say why not give Tylan Wallace some of those reps? Like, again, I think my ideal scenario for DeAndre Hopkins is you keep him fresh because DeAndre has struggled with injuries in 3 of the past 4 seasons. You want to keep him healthy and available. And what that means is, you know, with where he is at in his career, trying to manage snaps so that you can get into, you know, February, hopefully the Super Bowl, right? But, you know, you talk even earlier than that, December, January, and he's as fresh as possible, right? That's really, really important when it comes to some of these vets that might not be in their prime anymore, but still can contribute to you in the right role and with their snaps being managed the right way. Now, I'm not talking about like Calais Campbell level management or Justin Houston level management, some old familiar faces in Baltimore that were at the very, very, very tail end of their careers. I think DeAndre still has a couple solid years left. And not that Houston or Campbell didn't perform in the years they were in Baltimore at the tail end of their careers, but part of the reasons why they were able to is because they were able to manage snaps. Now, Calais played a lot of snaps for them certain years, and that was tough for Calais. But still, he went out there, he contributed. But Tylan Wallace is a guy that I think you can use to help DeAndre Hopkins, plus his skill set, in my opinion. It definitely does speak for itself. I think Keaton Mitchell's been a little bit of a forgotten man, if we're being honest. Now, not too forgotten. I feel like a lot of people are really excited for Keaton to come back. But Justice Hill feels like he's a little underrated still, too. I'm just being honest here. Like, Justice, to me, I didn't think he'd be on the roster back in 2021, right? You know, he had the whole thing with his injury alongside Gus and JK. They lost their whole running back room. I didn't know his status on the roster. He wasn't listed on the roster, but he was on it. What a comeback story, in my opinion, from Justice Hill. I got to give him all the credit in the world. He has shown up for Baltimore. He made so many big plays for them. Whenever they needed a pass down the sideline, it was Justice Hill who was there ready to catch that ball, explosive as a runner. Like, Keaton is that guy that everybody's super excited about. And I'm excited about, I'm ecstatic about Keaton coming back. I really think that can be an X-factor player for them. But, hey, Justice Hill was pretty good for them last season. I don't want that to be washed away because Keaton's coming back. I think that all 3 of these guys, including Derrick Henry, should be talked about with the level of, man, they can really help this team out. Now, obviously, Derrick Henry's Derrick Henry, right? But I think it's intriguing. And, you know, I put out polls on the YouTube page here on Locked On Ravens, and I haven't actually gone and checked it yet. Actually, you know what? We're going to do it right now. We're going to check. Put this out a couple hours ago. I asked if people think that by the end of the season this year, Keaton Mitchell will surpass Justice Hill, whether that is on the depth chart or production or role whatever it may be, right? There are certain ways you can interpret it, but the poll here right now at the time of this recording, we have 79 votes on it right now, 79 votes. 61% of people say no. Keaton Mitchell will not surpass Justice Hill by the time 2025 ends. 39% say yes. So I'm intrigued to see how that poll, kind of continues to evolve over the next handful of hours. But it's intriguing because I think Hill's such a good player, and he's honestly kind of underrated in my opinion. So he's someone that I really want people to look out for. Other names to me, I think Charlie Kohler's a little underrated too because everybody talks about Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, and rightfully so. But Kohler is a good football player. Is he to the level of those two other guys? I don't think so, obviously, but I still think he'd be at least a tight end 2 on a lot of other teams. And it speaks to how good Andrews and Likely are that Kohler's number 3. But he's good as a blocker. He's someone that can get out into space at times. He has the yak ability. He's not the fastest in the world. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that. But yak ability in terms of in the open field, maybe he'll make a guy miss. He's not the strongest in that. But, certainly he's shown in at times where, he'll find a soft spot in the defense. So I think he's underrated. Tavius Robinson, I'm telling you, Tavius Robinson is really underrated to me. Exceptional as a run defender, and he can give you the occasional pass rush too. I think he's going to play a huge role for Baltimore this season. You can kick him inside if you need to, and Baltimore is probably going to need some of that this year. So I think Tavius is someone you should absolutely keep your eyes on this year. I think another guy people aren't really talking about as much and, underrated, not necessarily in terms of production, but someone that I think would make a bigger impact this year is a guy like TJ Tampa. I think TJ Tampa is someone that it was tough for him with his rookie season, having it taken away for the most part due to the injuries, but someone who is very physical, can probably give you some reps, whether it be on the outside. Maybe you try him at safety a little bit, see if that could be a possible option for Baltimore to replace our Darius Washington, who 100% would have been on this list had he not gotten injured. So shout out to our Darius. And there are a lot of other guys on this roster you could probably consider underrated, or, I don't want to use the word underappreciated because I feel like these guys are appreciated by the fan base, but just in terms of not really expecting that guy to make a huge impact, or at least not as big of an impact considering someone's coming back. And I'm not saying the whole fan base feels that way, but guys that I just wanted to give a little more love to because I think that they certainly deserve it. And the guy that I'm honestly excited about, I'm not sure if I'd classify this guy as underrated, but I'll say it. I think Travis Jones is somebody that is going to have a huge role this season for them. Nandu Medibike is your number 1 D lineman, but I think Travis Jones is going to take a huge leap this season, and I'm really, really excited to see him. So that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in to the show today. On the way out, hit the like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along in audio form as well. We'll be right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens, talking more Ravens football, OTAs, and a whole lot more. So be sure to stay tuned, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.